Good afternoon, everyone, to this final meeting of the year of the Midlothian Council. I'd like to remind members that we are recorded, and to be heard, you need to put on your microphone and remember to turn them off again. Can I also say that we have a very heavy agenda today, and there's 25 items up for discussion. And if we take 10 minutes for each one, it will take us 4.5 hours to get out of here. If we take 15 minutes, it will take 6.5 hours. So I'd ask everyone who wants to make a contribution to be brief, and if you please don't have to make the contribution, please desist. Do you have any apologies for absence?
Thanks, Provost. We've got apologies from Councillors Young and Imrie.
The order of business.
Thanks, Provost. The order of business is as has been previously circulated.
Thank you. Any declarations of, I was going to say independence again. I better read this. Declarations of interest.
Reading that one. Sorry, Provost. I'd like to declare an interest in item 13 on the rent strategy. I am a council tenant. Declare an interest in item 19, which is Midlothian small grants allocation. I belong to the Bill Russell Woodburn Youth Project charity listed as obtaining grants.
Excuse me, can we ask for advice on this one? But
Item 13 is part of the general exemptions in terms of the Code of Conduct, and therefore that, thank you for declaring that interest, but it's unnecessary, and any member who is a council tenant may take part in that item without having to declare an interest.
Okay. Councillor Milligan.
Provost, could I just declare a sort of general interest on behalf of the whole Labour group involved in the small grants and the Galladay funding, as nearly every one of us are involved some way or another within one of the groups, but we will continue to take part in these items.
Again, Chair, if I just clarify for the record, the way that the grants and Gala funding is set up is that what the members are doing is overseeing the grant process and not dealing with any individual grants or Galladay funds themselves. If you were to deal with a grant or Galladay funding, you would have to declare an interest, but what you're doing is looking at the process and ensuring that the officers have carried it out correctly, and that way you don't have to declare an interest and can take part in the full discussion.
Okay. Item 4 is minutes of meetings for approval. Midlothian Council on the 3rd of November 2015. For noting and consideration and any recommendations therein. Cabinet on the 6th of October. Planning Committee the 25th of August. 29th of September. General Purposes Committee 29th of September. Local Review Body 20th of October. Performance Review and Scrutiny Committee 20th of October. Audit Committee 29th of September. Midlothian Safer Communities Board 18th of August 2015. Item number 5, questions to the Leader of the Council. None have been received. Item number 6, notices of motion 6A by Councillor Beattie.
Thank you, Provost. Welcome the opportunity today to bring this motion to Council. I think the question of fair trade is often thought of being a matter of expensive products which deliver a lesser quality. At least that's a popular perception in some quarters of what fair trade means. And that may at one time have been a reasonable thought, but times have moved on. And even when it was such, it was still a valid proposal to pursue the fair trade agenda. And it isn't just about coffee, cocoa and bananas, as many think. It's actually about something far more important and significant, which is the direct and indirect support that it gives to the producers of a numerous range of products, including coffee, cocoa and bananas. It's the farmers and their workers that actually benefit directly from this project. This project has been on the go for a very long time, and during that time, they had a vision for change. The promoters of fair trade always saw a different way in which the world could benefit from consuming goods from developing countries. That's moved on quite a long way since then. Between 2011 and 2013, the Fair Trade Organisation developed what they call a theory of change. That involves monitoring, evaluating and learning from that which the interventions they have introduced have impacted directly on the farmers and workers I alluded to already. The interest is not just in the immediate impact, but in the mid-term and long-term. And those long-term goals that need to be achieved for the benefit of all of us. This is about building evidence about the impact of fair trade. But it isn't, as I said already, just about the producers in the developing world learning. It's about all of us learning. It's about learning that will guide strategy and decision-making here in the post-industrial societies as well as elsewhere in the world. On the ground where these cocoa, coffee and bananas are being grown, there's less toxic pesticides, which mean better health outcomes, but less poverty also means less toxic social standards. With better financial rewards come the opportunities for shorter hours, realistic working practices that accommodate time for education, the provision of schools and books, healthier living standards, and the consequential benefits. Globally, the impact of this is in the long term hugely beneficial. The knock-on impact of reducing inequalities, improving opportunities for democracy, and with this, greater global socioeconomic and political stability. What's not to like about fair trade? Doesn't everyone deserve this? And I think this council will join with me in seeing just how very important a role we can play here in Midlothian. However small a part we may play, our role is not insignificant and we must take it very seriously. It's not just about more expensive goods for inferior quality. Those days are long gone. This is serious. It means now, and this council means business on fair trade. I propose the motion to this council. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Baxter.
Thank you, Provost. I'd first of all like to echo the sentiments of Councillor Beattie. In seconding this motion, I'd first of all like to draw members' attention to the fact that there's no party political logos on this motion, and that was deliberate. Councillor Russell, Councillor Beattie and myself have worked closely together on this, and the history of Midlothian Council shows that we are working as one in it. I would just further like to say that in reaffirming our commitment as a council, we will be reaffirming a commitment to continue to use fair trade tea, coffee and sugar and other products within our council offices, that we'll be exploring how to support fair trade, its promotion within procurement and purchasing strategy within the council, that we are encouraging the continued promotion of fair trade in schools, that we're continuing community activities to promote fair trade, particularly during Fair Trade Fortnight, and that we're promoting fair trade issues and practices amongst local businesses and other organisations. We're therefore reaffirming a sentiment that this council has long stood for, and I therefore would like to formally second this motion.
Thank you. Councillor Russell.
Thank you, Provost. Obviously, keeping it brief, just I'd like to concur with the sentiments that's been mentioned today with regards to the fair trade.
Councillor Pottinger.
Keeping it really brief, but the fair trade idea is nothing new to this side of the table. The cooperative movement and the cooperative party brought fair trade in, and they were the pioneers for it, and it's our sister party. No put any party logos in it either. But the past, present and future of fair trade does have a future with the Labour group.
Thank you. Can we pass that motion on fair trade? Thank you. Item 6B, a motion by the Labour group and proposed by Councillor Montgomery.
Thanks, Provost.
Just to say at the start, we'll accept the amendment. That will become clear in item 16 later on when we come to that. The reasons why we're doing that. I think the incidents in Paris, I mean, it's going to focus me on a number of issues, and certainly the public safety aspect of the police and the fire and the rescue service. Excuse me. I think it does deserve as much support as it can get, and it certainly needs the support of the whole council. As I say, when it comes to item 16, we'll make a position quite clear on what we're going to be doing. The one that kind of triggered this as a motion, if you want, was when just after the bombing there was somebody let a firework off in one of the streets in Paris, and it caused absolute bedlam. And I've been thinking about for quite a wee while now that, you know, if you set a firework off at a railway station or at an airport, it would cause absolute mayhem. And I think the repercussions of that are really quite serious. So how we can actually go about this and make sure the displays are licensed, it might have to be a voluntary code, because I understand from I'll interpret that there is an issue with a bylaw, but we can have a look at that anyway. I'd be concerned that we're still selling it to members of the public. There's a recent football match in Pennycook where there was a team through, I'll just say the west of Scotland, but they were actually letting fireworks off in the middle of the afternoon out in the street. You can't have that. It just can't be that. We just can't have the likes of that. So as I say, I've spoken to the police. They're not unhappy about this. You know, they'll not give any support to it, but they're prepared to work on this basis, and obviously that would be through the boards that are as an item 16. I've also spoken, I don't want to get too excited about this, but I've spoken to the guys at Armed Forces, and they reckon some of the bigger ones that you can buy in some of the superstores now are about 30 quid, and they reckon you could make a bomb out of them quite easily if you really wanted to. So we can't be selling that to 18-year-olds or members of the public. It should just be licensed displays, and I think it would make a lot of sense to do that. I see Christine Graham's got a thing in at the moment. It was in the town crier, and you've maybe seen it, about the shock collars for dog training. There's a move in Parliament to get them banned. There was 4 dogs actually disappeared or ran away on bonfire night, 5th of November. And as far as I know, they haven't actually came back. So, I mean, we really need to make sure we can try and do something about this. How successful it'll be, I really don't know. But, you know, I think we should be trying. And as I say, I think the consequences of what happened in Paris certainly give everybody a fright. I think we should be passing this motion. And by accepting the amendment, obviously, you'll be supporting it. So, Councillor Muirhead.
I'll just second Councillor Montgomery in that. If you recall, I think probably a year and a half ago, maybe 2.5 years ago, at Newbattle High School, the school was in lockdown for a number of hours with all sorts of panic on Facebook and across the internet about what had happened there, shootings and things like that, and it turned out to be fireworks. Again, total irresponsible use of fireworks. The right place for fireworks is in organised displays, no on sale to members of the public, anybody that can go in and buy them at our local stores.
Councillor Rosie.
Yeah, thanks, and thanks for accepting the amendment. I think that will be useful. I think this is worthy of discussion and debate, and I think we have. I'm not too sure about banning the sale in shops, because I think folk will just go to Edinburgh and ban them. But I think you're right. I'd like to go further, and I notice at the moment that there is a petition online, and that's going to the Westminster government to actually only have them at organised events. And I think the way folks are talking here, I think that's the way we should be going, is have it organised events only, not for sale to the public. And I would go along with that, and we will always support them.
Councillor Parry.
Thanks, Provost. Yeah, just to second the amendment, but also to just be mindful of the point of, I'm just aware that linking this to what happened in Paris and talking about kind of terrorism and bombing stuff, I think we do just have to be mindful that we take it in context. I appreciate the local incidents that have happened, but I just wanted to draw caution to that and propose move forward with the amendment.
Okay, so that motion accepted by the Council. Thank you. Item number 6C, a motion by the Labour Group and proposed by Councillor Russell.
Thank you, Provost. I move this motion today as I feel that a car park on this site is inappropriate use of land. In July 2011, at a meeting of the Council subgroup of the Midlothian Housing Strategy Forum, there was a minute of discussion on housing in Midlothian, and under the heading High Priority Area was listed Woodburn Community Centre site, and that was proposed for 18 houses. There was also a site 26 on the plans, which is 32 to 38 Buccleuch Street. 12 houses had been identified against on that site. We know that the Dalkeith Community Centre was demolished and houses is now built. However, the Buccleuch Street site did not happen. My recollection at that time was that the workshop buildings in this site, which was owned by, at that time, by the Faulkner family, would be demolished, including the front shops and flats. In its place would have been one-bedroom studio flats. In fact, I'm sure we did, as a group, visited examples in other local authorities that had studio flats. If these one-bedroom properties had been given the go-ahead at the time in Phase 2 back in 2011, whilst not enough to make a huge dent on the housing allocations, it would still have been useful. Here we are now in 2015, and the allocation lists for one bedroom for Midlothian is 2,682, and 1,434 of these are on the Dalkeith list. We all have single people on our lists who are not deemed to be high priority and are having to wait, on many occasions I've heard 7 years, I've heard 12 years. It's actually quite soul-destroying for people that are on those lists, which is obviously why I felt it appropriate to bring this motion through. We now have the plan to use this site for an entirely different and inappropriate use for a 24-car park and demolish the dividing wall to allow the traffic to use the existing entrance and exit. My motion is asking that the Council agree to a request to instruct officers to look at site 26 as a site for single-person accommodation in the centre of Dalkeith, and the car park idea be abandoned.
Councillor Bennett.
Thanks, Provost. Seconding the motion, Margot's right, this was discussed way back in 2011, and one of the reasons it was raised at that time was when they brought in the council tax, the bedroom tax, which was going to affect people who were in two-bedroom houses and required one-bedroom houses, and we were looking to utilise land that we had for building council houses. Now, this site was identified, I think it was referred to, and I know Colin Beattie had raised it before in the past, about students-type flats, and this was then earmarked, because really, Chairman, the last thing we need in Dalkeith is another car park. I mean, at the last General Purpose and Scrutiny Committee, Gary Sherritt says in Dalkeith there's 1,200 parking spaces. And if you take into account they're even parking at bus stops in the double-year alliance, we didn't need car parks, but we need houses for single people. And therefore I've great pleasure in seconding this motion, and I hope it's unanimous, that we do recognise that people come before parking cars.
Councillor Rosie.
Well, sorry to go against the goodwill at the start of this meeting, but I feel that at this stage this motion isn't necessary, as the area being used as a car park at present does not preclude the use for housing in the future. And I think that while there's a feasibility study ongoing at the moment in Dalkeith Town Centre, I just feel we shouldn't be looking at this just now. I think I have discussed that site with a planning officer, and I think there are issues on the narrowness of the site, access, and the overlooking of other properties in there could be an issue. And I just feel that we should not be committing to this type of development until we get the results of the feasibility study and consultation as regards the town centre. And it's for these reasons I would move to oppose the motion.
Councillor Baxter.
Thank you, Provost. I'm going to support this motion. I just feel that it sends the right signal of the direction of travel this council should be travelling in. that we really have to provide more housing. We all know that. I also think that by providing what seems to be an over provision of car parking spaces in Dalkeith, we're encouraging people to travel by a mode of transport that we should be discouraging. I just feel that, yes, I agree with Councillor Rosie, it doesn't preclude us from making different decisions in the future, but I feel that by adopting this motion, we're sending a clear signal and marking out our intent, and I will support it.
Councillor Johnson.
Thank you very much. I'm going to support Derek Rosie's amendment to this motion to have no action, because I think we should wait until the feasibility study has been finished and not make assumptions before that's done.
Councillor Pottinger.
There's assumptions already been made. There's plan applications being lodged. There's a lot of other things you should be taking into consideration. The future Melville housing in the town centre here, moving out. The fact that there's a sign up at the back of the job centre from a property company, Sibbald, saying 8 spaces for sale or rent. The car parking needs, and there's and also the current disciplines for our own Midlothian House car park, which has been reorganised. I think more appropriately that if you want to take the big picture, all these things can get taken into a big picture. But the thing is, this is now running, and an application has been lodged, and we think it's the wrong application, and we should send out the correct message, that affordable single person housing is more appropriate use of this particular site.
Councillor Russell.
Can I claim the right to reply? I think everyone's had a say. Yeah, thank you. Disappointed, obviously, that there's opposition to this idea. Yeah, I know the feasibility study is ongoing, but my recollection is that it will be coming back to the council, but the whole aspect of the various parts of the feasibility study, you were looking at 2020 before it would be coming to anything. Now, I've been long enough in this council to remember the first town centre regeneration plan, which was 10 years ago, which sadly came to nothing. And one worries that the similar aspect to this particular study the same could happen. And in the meantime, we have all those people on the waiting list who I know would be quite delighted if this local authority took a decision to think more about people than to think about cars.
Okay, we have opposition to the motion. Those opposed to the motion, please show.
Nine.
Those for the motion, please show.
7.
Okay, the motion fails. Item number 7, the Financial Strategy 2016-17 to 2020-21, an update by Mr Fairley, the Head of Finance and Integrated Service Support.
Thanks, Provost. Provost, this report provides Council with an update on the financial strategy and follows publication of the UK Government Spending Review on the 25th of November. I'm sure as members are well aware, this time tomorrow we will see publication of the Scottish Government's 2016-17 budget, together with the grant circular setting out the local government grant settlements for next year. So tomorrow is very much a key milestone in the journey of developing budget proposals for next financial year. And I suppose put simply, tomorrow, all being well, we'll see the speculation end and we'll know how much money we're going to have to spend on services in 16-17. And that funding package, when whether good or bad, will then allow us to determine what options are with a view to coming back to Council in February. Section 3 sets out, Section 3 provides members with an update on the process, as I said, highlighting the potential for a very challenging settlement for local government for the year ahead. We've captured that challenge within the report in terms of the motion that was passed at the last COSLA leaders meeting on the 27th of November. Given the imminent publication of settlement figures tomorrow, I haven't updated the projections that are set out in the report from those that were used on the 22nd of September. But just for members' information, every 1% cash reduction in the grant support that we receive from Scottish Government equates to approximately £1.1 million cash reduction in terms of the resources we'll have available. So, for example, a reduction of 3% in grant, if that was to happen tomorrow, would increase next year's budget gap to over £5 million from the approximately £2 million that it sat at in September. As well as the grant settlement, Section 5 of the report highlights two emerging cost pressures that have come subsequent to the spending review, the apprenticeship levy and also the amendment proposed to the education bill. Together these could potentially increase our cost base by over £1 million. Although even as late as yesterday, there was information that suggested that the amendment to the education bill, which is around the 25 hours for primary children, would not be effective until the August 17 term, so it gives us a little bit of leeway. But both of those things alone, potential to put £1 million on our cost base. Given the criticality of tomorrow's announcements, Council's already decided to determine the 16-17 budget and council tax levels when it next meets again in February 16. So today, Provost, I'm really just asking Council to approve the recommendations which are set out in Section 12 of the report.
Thank you, Mr Fairley. Councillor Parry.
Thanks, Provost, and thanks, Gary, for this report. I think we're all apprehensive about tomorrow's announcement, and I was personally devastated sitting watching the spending review and looking at the cuts that'll undoubtedly follow to the Scottish budget, and not just to the Scottish budget. I think it's important that we recognise that there is other budgets that will further affect us, that will further push vulnerable people into poverty, and that may further impact us as well. So I think we'll look ahead to tomorrow's announcement, but I do want to make a point to congratulate the administration and the officers for keeping us certainly in line with the position that we are just now. I think we've done incredibly well to be able to continue services like house building and schools and such like, while already going through the cuts that we have faced. So I just move that we approve the recommendations. Thank you.
Questions or comments? Happy to note the report then. Thank you. Item number 8, New Battle Centre European System of Accounts 2010 update. Report by Mr Sherritt, Head of Property and Facilities Management.
Thanks, Provost. This report's to provide Council with a further update in relation to Scottish Futures Trust progress with resolving the ESA 10 issue relating to New Battle High School. On June 23rd this year, Council received a report updating on the ESA 10 situation following a briefing by SFT, as was understood at that point in time. SFT in that outlined a number of changes required to the legal and financial structure of the contracts. Since then, we've received, very recently, the findings from the Office of National Statistics, and it's confirmed that the policy proposals for the hub contracts put forward by SFT would privately classify the projects and therefore allow the projects to move on to financial close. The Scottish Government has agreed to all the amendments and has continued to reaffirm its commitment to the projects in the hub pipeline. They have also confirmed that they would provide the essential funding uplift that is required to bridge the gap on the delay that we've seen in the projects to date. and they will be putting in place the financial package to ensure that we are in a no worse position than we started. We are now expected to go to financial close by March next year, and following that milestone we will move on to a site start thereafter. We are working closely with SFT to make sure that that set of contractual changes and financial implications are mitigated and nullified. And we're doing that right now to keep on that time track that's set out in this report. The report recommends that Council's notes the decision by the Office of National Statistics and the SFT have advised to commence to financial close to the delivery of Newbattle High School, to note the potential resource implications and inflation risks, and instruct the Director of Resources to recover from SFT Scottish Government all additional costs as a result of the delays created by ISA 10, and instruct the Director of Resources to provide a further report confirming the outcome of the financial close stage and the resultant construction phase programme.
Councillor Rosie.
Thank you. Thanks, Provost, and thanks, Gary. Well, we welcome that the ISA 10 situation has been resolved and that the Scottish Futures Trust has confirmed that the Council will be no worse off. This situation was out with the control of the Council and the Scottish Government, and it's my understanding that the Scottish Government did offer several solutions to the Office of National Statistics, but none were accepted. But it's good to see that we now can get ahead with the project, and I would recommend that we accept the recommendations as detailed by Gary.
Thank you. Councillor Muirhead.
Yeah, I think we'll put aside who's to blame for this, but what I'm really pleased we're in a situation where we've moved ahead here, albeit we're obviously not quite there yet. I'm disappointed, I've got to say, that we're talking about March before we actually reach financial close. But I'm particularly pleased for the parents, pupils and Newbattle staff that they've at least taken what seems to be a major step forward. My slight concern here is that you mentioned, Gary, on page 20, that where you talk about it might take some time to obtain agreement from the various parties, you specifically indicate that the risk that the private sector partner may be unwilling to accept the changes. Are you any further forward on that now than you were when you wrote the report? Have we any indication as to whether that is still the case or not?
Yeah, thanks for recognising the report was written on the 2nd of December. Since the fortnight has passed, really, that we've had, I can update that the financial close position, we are actually ahead of programme on that. So March is a long stop date that we're looking towards, and we're trying to put in place a method of getting on site as early as possible. So we are proactively dealing with that. In terms of getting agreement from all the parties, again in the last fortnight we've been going round that through the various mediums of the board, the Territory Partnering Board and others, and that includes the private sector, and it does look like there's consensus and agreement that this will be acceptable, albeit that's not in writing as yet, but we are making progress towards that.
Councillor Mulligan.
Yeah, Provost, when this building started out and we approved going down this route, this was already going to be one of the most expensive buildings we had ever built. What is now the position with this? What is the cost going to be completely to the council? Because while you're saying you're going to go and recover that, that'll have to be negotiated at some cost. But I mean, is this now going to be the single most expensive building that the public have ever had to pay for in Midlothian?
Microphone.
I think what I'll do is I'll come back with that, as I say, in the final recommendation to Council with a full report on that. The capital cost for the project sits at this present time at 34.6 million. That's where it sits. Now that's less than what we paid at Last Wade High School, for example, which was closer to the 40 million. But in terms of the detail, it will come back in a report to Council.
Councillor Mulligan.
Yeah, I find it difficult, Gary, that you can't answer that straight out, because Dalkeith High School, Bonnyrigg and Lastwood High School is a completely different ball game. For example, the gymnastics centre, which was put back in there, it's certainly a bigger school, but square metre for square metre, this was already going to be extortionate compared to every other school that we had built. Is it now away through the roof? And that's to the public purse, never mind just to the council purse. Is that to the public purse? Is this now going to be by far the most expensive building we've ever built? That should be dead easy for the finance guys to answer right now.
I think, as I say, the detail is going to come out in that report, which is coming back to council. For me to actually sit down and give you an analysis when I don't have that in front of me, that would be telling you the wrong story. I think the detail will come in that report.
Councillor Mulligan.
I would then hope that Gary Fairley or John Blair should be able to answer that question.
This report provides an update on the programme in ISA 10. There's been no fundamental shift in the structure of the project in terms of funding it through the not-for-profit distribution model. I don't have the previous report to council in front of me, but the recollection was always that when we got to financial close there would be a report which would come back to council outlining the capital cost of the project and also the funding implications over the life of the asset and the revenue implications for council as a consequence of that. So it's a there is no fundamental change to the funding structure, if you like, it being the not-for-profit model. There's still work to do now that the final analysis, the final structure of the hub-co model has been developed for to comply with ISA 10, and we need to work that through so that we fully understand that. And a key part of that is having the final figures from Scottish Government in terms of the making sure that we're no worse off how that flows through into a revenue stream across the life of the project. So it is extremely challenging in the time we've had since the announcement was made to today to include that within this paper, but it would come as part of the financial close report to council.
Councillor Constable.
Thank you, Provost. Well, we've had, I'll not talk about the money, I just want to say this is fantastic news. When I got it 2 or 3 weeks ago, it was an early Christmas present for Midlothian and definitely for the people of New Battle High School and the pupils and the community around about. So we really look forward to it, and we hope that we get spades into the ground as soon as possible.
Are you going to say something different, Councillor Pottinger, rather than still berating the same point?
I'm sorry, Provost. Labour members will be allowed to speak in this chamber without you coming and preempting what they're saying at any time.
I'm trying to get this meeting pushed along, Councillor Mulligan, and I would advise you not to hit the button when we're having a discussion here. Okay?
Listen, when you try to cut off Labour members, I'll button every time. Okay? They're free to speak in this meeting. If you're not happy to stay, get yourself away up the road. Okay?
I determine what happens at this meeting. I'm sorry, you've had your bash at this, you didn't get it now. Councillor Pottinger.
Thank you very much, Chair, for letting me speak. I hope any time I do speak, it's valid and poignant. And the questions would be more to the future of the Scottish Futures Trust, and I hope the lessons have been learnt from that we don't get into this kind of situations again with the criteria for funding. And I think that's major. And the major changes that we seem to be having to this, and maybe Gary, well, any Gary, can maybe confirm to this, but using the special purchase vehicle more, moving the charity part of that more, and moving more money out of our capital grant to the school and into borrowing requirements. Is that could you confirm to me, is that the major changes that have occurred recently?
There have been a number of changes to the structure of the hubco model to make sure it's compliant with the ISA 10 requirements. Certainly that restricted the resources that council would be able to put as a capital injection to the project. So that was one of the number of changes. The report provides an update on progress. It doesn't, and we've had a previous report, again, if my memory serves me right, that set out the the implications for hub-based models around the funding arrangements. I would refer members back to that report that was considered in a previous council meeting. But in terms of the funding, council has already recognised that it can't make a capital contribution into the project to the extent it previously had planned to do, and that will restrict, that changes that element of funding.
Councillor Pottinger, and you'll be the last.
Can you confirm if that the amount that we're taking at capital and putting into borrowing is 6 million?
No, that's not the case. We'd previously agreed that we would, council had previously agreed to set aside £6 million from our capital fund that we would inject into the project. The arrangement will be that will be funded through that sum will not be funded from the capital fund, but will be funded through the HubCo model through the DBFM vehicle.
Okay, council happy to accept the recommendations in this report. Thank you. Item number 9. Which is raising attainment, closing the gap, examination attainment 2015, a report by Dr. Grace Vickers, Head of Education.
Thank you. Further to the National Improvement Framework report, which was presented to Council on the 3rd of November, the purpose of this particular report is to give an overview of secondary school examination attainment, but also, and more importantly, the next steps for improvement. Sections 2.2 to 2.6 outline the detail around the raising attainment and closing the gap, and the report itself concludes with 4 recommendations. Firstly, to note the significant improvements in performance outlined in the report, to note the next steps for improvement, which I've outlined on pages 2, 3, 5, 6 and 8 of the report. Thirdly, to invite secondary head teachers to outline their school's progress in raising attainment and closing the gap in an annual seminar for elected members prior to the December attainment report to Council commencing in December 2016. And finally, to provide an attainment report to Council in May and December each year, outlining progress made in raising attainment and closing the gap in Midlothian.
Councillor Constable.
Thank you, Provost. Yes, I'd like to thank Grace for this excellent report we've got here, and in noting the significant improvements in the recommendations. In the section 4 on the recommendations, in bullet point 3, I'd like to note that I've learnt that the secondary head teachers are very positive about coming in to meet us all and make their reports in December each year. This is very good, and it helps to tie in Midlothian education to Midlothian Council, all to be very welcome. Thank you.
Mr.
Thank you, Provost. Just very briefly, I think this is really a very useful paper, and I think we should recognise, as Bob has just said, the progress that has been made across a range of areas. The paper does highlight the uptake for higher education, and it does so rightly. And I always believed as a teacher, I'm sure Bob would agree with me, that the foundations for that are laid in S3 and S4. And I think what's good is to see the progress made in Midlothian at level 5 subjects at level 5 in S4, and then we see 5 subjects at level 6. There is work to be done here, but I believe the foundations have been laid, and I wish our teaching staff every success, and I look forward to future improvements, particularly in this area. Thank you, Provost.
Thank you, Mr. Bourne. Councillor Muirhead.
Yeah, I just wonder how much time is going to be taken up at this meeting. The members telling the Provost before they start that they're going to be brief. Can I welcome this report? In particular, I've had a quite an in-depth briefing on it, and I like the way that it enables us to target areas that we need to really work on, because that's the only way we can really improve is by focusing on the areas that we can have the most impact on. So I'm very pleased with this report, and like Councillor Constable, I'm happy with the suggestion here that the head teachers attend meetings with the elected members in December every year to go through the report and presenting their sort of plans to the councillors for their plans for improvement. So, as I say, good report, very, very pleased with it, and it does show up some quite interesting facts and figures and maybe areas that we wouldn't have expected it to. But thank you.
Councillor Coventry.
Thanks, Provost. As someone who has the privilege to work in this field, I just want to make a couple of points. I particularly welcome the significant improvements mentioned in the report. I think it's important that we also mention the fact that, you know, individuals, young people, adults, we all learn, we all have different forms of intelligence and we all learn in different ways. And for example, we should welcome what's called the enhanced curriculum at schools, which is allowing many young people to experience vocational subjects rather than academic, if that's where their strengths lie. At the foot of page 27, it mentions the high numbers of young people in Midlothian leaving school and going directly into employment. It's just a couple of points I want to mention here. The national weekly wage in Midlothian is £36 below the Scottish national average. Now, this suggests that many young people in Midlothian are going into relatively poorly paid and low-skilled employment. And there's a real danger that during the next economic downturn that this will have a disproportionate impact upon the young people in Midlothian. Just another couple of points. Scottish Government research, for example, in June 2014, shows that youth unemployment, and I'm speaking about young people between the ages of 16 and 24, is running at 18.8%. It's nearly 1 in 5 of our young people are in a negative destination. It's horrendous. It's 18.4 at a UK level, against an all-age working population unemployment rate of 6.4. The top 5 European average is currently 11% for young people, and Scotland is ranked 9th in a European league table. So I'm going back here to 2012. Estimates in 2012 suggested that the average annual cost and benefits to a young unemployed person aged 18 to 24 were £5,661. So based on this, moving 100 of these young job seekers into employment would save over £500,000 a year in benefits. Now, the whole point about education and attainment is the fact that you've got to prepare young people for the world of work. We've also got to ensure that young people, when they leave school, they may leave with few qualifications, but we've got to, as a society and as a council and as a country, ensure that we always leave avenues back into education for our population. So I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Councillor Beattie.
Briefly, Provost, I just wanted to add my compliments and congratulations to everybody involved in the field of education in Midlothian. It's some of these improvements, and I don't wish to sound smug about this, but some of these achievements are quite extraordinary. But the most outstanding one that I have to comment on is that of St David's High School, which really pulled the hat out of the bag, and there must have been a most phenomenal effort there to have achieved what they have. And I'd just like to extend my compliments, and I know I'm not... in achieving this. Sorry about that, Provost.
Council happy to accept the recommendations. Thank you. Item 10, creating and developing positive destination posts for adults and young people within Midlothian Council. A report by Dr. Smith, Education, Communities and Economy.
Okay, thank you, Provost. This kind of follows on from the previous report. And the purpose of the report is to identify ways to increase employment opportunities within Midlothian Council for those who are unlikely to secure a positive destination. So Section 2 sets out the background and options for developing such an option at limited cost to the Council. Section 2.4, it's clear that anything we develop must not disadvantage others or indeed advantage others. Section 2.5 outlines a model for recruitment which would ensure that we do not breach equalities legislation, and Section 5 sets out the recommendations as per the paper. I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Constable.
Thank you, Robert. Yes, happy to move the recommendations. There has been care taken for any equality issues on that, and agrees both bullet points in the recommendation section 5, especially agree that the targets will be set by the heads of service in relation to the number or percentage of vacancies to be converted on an annual basis. So happy to move the recommendations.
Questions or comments? Councillor Coventry.
I just wanted to ask if there was any plans to make use of the trainees at the Midlothian training services, you know, giving them posts with Midlothian Council.
These posts would be, where a vacancy becomes available, then these posts would be circulated widely to young people. So it would be Midlothian Training Services, PAVE, schools, you know, it would be how we get young people in, but also youngsters who are leaving college and things like that as well. So it's about positive destinations across the board. So it's not just about one area, it's a number of areas.
Council happy to accept the recommendations? Okay, thank you. Item 11, Catchment Review Programme, a report by Dr Smith.
Thank you, Provost. This is quite a complex paper, and I don't know if you want me to read it out as per 2.1, you know, all the background, or whether you just want me to just talk generally about it. However, members may recall that we presented a catchment review programme in December 2014, and the purpose of this report provides an update on the progress and outlines the proposed next phases of the programme. So section 2 outlines the 8 recommendations from the previous report. And from 2.1 I can give you a brief overview, or do you want me just to... Brief's fine. Okay, sorry. 2.1 outlines the consultation undertaken in the new battle area, which is subject to a separate report today, item 12. It also outlines the consultation taken in relation to Bilston. Section 2.2 outlines the consultation for Lonehead and Paradise, and a report will come to February Council. Section 2.3 outlines the proposed work to be undertaken in relation to Bonnyrigg, Lasswade and Auchendirnie. Section 2.4 outlines a feasibility study into Shawfair, and that's subject to a separate paper today. Section 2.5 outlines work required into secondary education in Pennycook and along the A701. Section 2.6 looks at the potential sites for a possible future Gorebridge High School if required, and we're looking at possible Redheugh, Gouts Hill or St Andrews. Section 3.1 outlines Roman Catholic provision, so consultation on the development of a strategy for denominational school provision. Section 3.2 outlines a review required for Newton Grange, Mayfield and Lawfield, and Section 3.3 outlines a feasibility required for Kings Park, Woodburn and St David's. And the recommendations are as outlined in the body of the report.
Thank you, Dr Smith. Councillor Constable.
I'll not go through the detail on this either. There's a lot to it, well worth reading. Catchment reviews are like painting the Forth Bridge. We're going to have to keep doing them all the time. Education is constantly changing in Midlothian with new schools, new houses all over, so it's something we're going to have to live with, and it's something to be welcomed. I just want to agree to move the recommendations on it and encourage members to read how it affects their particular areas.
Questions or comments? Councillor Muirhead.
I was actually going to ask a question on the next report, but I think it might actually be more pertinent to the general issue of the catchment review programme. Bear with me a second. There's an item on the next paper, and it gives reassurance that all pupils already attending a school whose house is moving from catchment area of one school to the catchment area of another can remain at their current school. The question I want to ask about that whole issue is, could there be, or are there any children or families that are identified that are currently outside the limit for school transport, where the new catchment area takes them inside that, but they choose to send their kids to the original school, will they still get paid transport? If that is it. Do you understand the question, Mary? No. If there are pupils at the moment attending their catchment area school and they're getting paid school transport to it, if the new catchment area for the school is within the limit, but they choose to send, as is being suggested with the recommendation on the next item, to send their children, keep their children at the school they were at, will they still get the paid school transport?
Can I come back to you on that one? Because I would need to look at what the actual rules are. So rather than give you an answer off the top of my head, I would rather come back to you on that one.
There may not be any, and I've not got any I can give you, but it's just if we need a clarification on that issue, I think.
Okay. Mr. Bourne.
Thanks, Provost. I think this is a very useful paper, and it's a very clear paper. I think the thing that really struck me is it's quite an exciting thing, is in Appendix 2, when you actually look at the planned and proposed developments, and you look at the sheer growth in Midlothian, that there could be 16,000 plus more houses on an existing base of 37. We are going to be one very big authority, and I think this particular project is absolutely essential that it's implemented. I realise there will be a lot of individual feelings, and I can understand that within local communities. And just to reassure on the very small part that I will give every possible support to the review of the Catholic primary schools and also to the project that's ongoing at the moment in Rosewell and Bonnyrigg. Thank you, Provost.
Thank you. Happy to accept the recommendations in the report. Thank you. Item 12, consultation on the catchment areas of schools in the new battle associated school group. Report by Dr. Smith.
Thank you, Provost. So this is just reporting back on one of the consultations that have been undertaken, and it follows on from the previous report and seeks approval from members to implement the establishment of a new primary school in Gorebridge and changes to the catchment areas in Stobhill, Mayfield, Newton Grange, and the relocation of New Battle High School to the replacement site, and that's a requirement of Education Scotland. So section 2.1 to 2.13 outlines the consultation process that we've undertaken by officers and actions we will take to address issues raised through the consultation process. And section 4 outlines the recommendations as in the report.
Thank you. Councillor Constable.
Happy to move the recommendations and thank all those who took part in the consultations.
Council happy to accept the recommendations. Thank you. Item number 13, the Housing Revenue Account Rent Setting Strategy 2016-17 to 2018-19. A report by Evelyn McCure. Oh, Kevin Anderson.
I'll speak to this, thank you, Provost. This report proposes a strategy for future rental charges for council housing from 2016 to support ongoing investment in the council's housing stock through a new build investment programme beyond the current phase 2 of the social housing programme, with borrowing costs which are associated in the new build programme, and to fund through the rental stream for new and existing properties relative to the housing quality standard investment, as we've assumed a minimum rent increase of 4% beyond the rent increase strategy which was set from February 2011 through to 2015-16, and over that period for the housing stock being maintained. In terms of Section 3, Midlothian Council has worked not alone but with partners to increase affordable housing provision in a variety of ways, which are detailed in that section. However, the recent housing needs and demands assessment carried out for the assess plan process of the South East of Scotland area has indicated that there's a projected housing need of 2,730 new affordable houses required in Midlothian. Without continued investment, the implications are that there would be increases in the number of homeless households requiring temporary accommodation, with higher levels of overcrowding and households being unsuitably housed for longer periods. Within Section 3.5, the terms of the Midlothian Council rents compare favourably to other landlords. This is detailed on page 90 of your papers in Chart 2, showing the average weekly rent for all Scottish councils. Midlothian's weekly rent charge is an average of £59.81 against the Scottish average of £66.08. In Section 4, we've outlined the extensive consultation exercise which was undertaken with tenants and prospective tenants, otherwise known as housing applicants. This is detailed in Appendix 1 of the attached report, with a response rate of 11%, which is a significant improvement from the last exercise undertaken in 2010. In Section 5, we've detailed the rent choice options which were surveyed and canvassed in terms of the outcomes for additional houses and the respective option results which are detailed in Section 5.2. Option 3 provides a compromise between the investment in new housing and recognising the views of tenants in particular about the affordability of their rent. The resource for this proposed programme relative to the HRA capital plan is detailed in Section 6.1 for resources, but I would draw members' attentions to the final paragraph in that section where Council on the 23rd of June made inquiry about funding approximately £2 million relative to funding footpath repairs, and I advise that the HRA reserve is fully committed to fund the new social housing project. Consequently, funding this project of footpath repairs would therefore require either a reduction in the continuing investment in the capital programme or future phases of the new social housing programme, i.e. there'll be less houses if we fund the footpath programme. That takes me to Section 7 in terms of the recommendations to Council, which are to note the positive response to the consultation from tenants and prospective tenants, to agree a 3-year rent increase and related charges of 5% per annum from the 1st of April 2016 through to the 31st of March 2019. Consequently, to incorporate a provision of £36 million in the HRA capital plan for a Phase 3 new build programme, to agree to a members' seminar in order that we can discuss the potential sites and housing mix of that phase, and to reprioritise to fund the footpath works from the general fund if members agree. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Anderton. Councillor Parry.
Thanks, Provost. Thanks, Kevin, for this report. I'll keep it exceptionally brief. Just really wanted to thank the participants. It's great to see the increase in participation in the survey and so many people noting the value for money. I think it's a really good report and I'd move that we accept the recommendations.
Council happy to accept the recommendations. Thank you. Item number 14, the Borders Rail update, a report by the Chief Executive, Kenneth Laurie.
Thank you, Provost. This report advises members of the activity undertaken and the future work planned relating to the Borders Railway, and particularly in relation to maximising the economic benefits for Midlothian. At the Council meeting in December last year, in recognition of the economic development opportunity, the Council agreed that £250,000 be allocated to supporting this work, and that recommendation was formally approved by the Council as a budget allocation on the 17th of February. The work being taken forward by the Council is primarily based on the November 2014 blueprint document published by the Scottish Government, Scottish Borders, Midlothian and City of Edinburgh Councils, Transport Scotland, Scottish Enterprise and Visit Scotland. And at the heart of this document was the ambition to realise fully the economic benefits of the new railway, particularly by stimulating the growth of businesses, generating employment and boosting tourist visitor numbers. Today's report sets out the activity flowing from this, including the development of the Inward Investment Prospectus, the establishment of a Boarded Railway Investment Fund, the appointment of an Inward Investment Project Manager, and in that context, we're currently preparing well-resourced and well-presented inventories of sites and buildings which are readily available for investors and new businesses to locate and/or relocate to Midlothian. In addition, work has been done to explore means of promoting access to skills and learning opportunities, using additional visitor numbers as a catalyst for improvement in town centres and at the National Mining Museum, and developing footways and cycleways links to the stations. In relation to tourism, the report sets out the launch of the Business Opportunities Guide for tourist businesses, the appointment of a tourism business advisor, and a visitor marketing programme led by Visit Scotland. The Council has been active in working with local tourist businesses, the Midlothian Tourism Forum and the Chamber of Commerce in promoting the opportunities presented by the new railway to the Midlothian tourism sector. Consideration has also been given to a potential arrangement for a hop-on, hop-off corridor route bus service from Newton Grange Station to the main tourist and visitor attractions in Midlothian. In the first month of operation, 126,000 passengers used the new railway. On the basis of that, a conservative annual projection would see numbers significantly in excess of 1 million, as opposed to the pre-opening projection of 647,000 passengers. So that is a very considerable success. There have been some well-publicised concerns regarding the lack of sufficient rolling stock at times, and this has been raised directly with the train operator, and the Council will continue to lobby wherever possible for the rapid resolution of this issue. Midlothian Council, in collaboration with Transport Scotland, are funding the installation of interactive touchscreen terminals which will be located on platforms and other key locations from February of next year. And there is also a programme being undertaken by colleagues in Resources to augment the signage in the vicinity of the various stations. In terms of resources, there is of course the opportunity for bids to be submitted for appropriate projects to a £10 million fund provided by the Scottish Government through Scottish Enterprise and managed by the Blueprint Group. Most of the work we've done so far as a council, with the exception of the pre-opening weekend community events, has been jointly done and jointly funded with partners, and that has included some utilisation of that £10 million fund. The total resource allocation of the Council in terms of funds expended to date is £247,000. However, there is additional expenditure emerging in years 2016-17 and 17-18, specifically in relation to ongoing marketing. And these additional costs are estimated at £50,000 over 2 years. And accordingly, this report recommends action to address the future position in terms of financial commitments related to the railway. The recommendations are set out at section 6. It's recommended that the Council notes the extensive level of commitment being shown by the Council and its partners towards maximising economic benefits in Midlothian, approves a supplementary estimate of £50,000 to meet ongoing commitments to activities relating to that, and instructs the submission of further update reports on a regular basis.
Thank you. Councillor Rosie.
Thanks, Provost. Thanks, Kenneth, for the report. I think it's good to see that the work ongoing at the moment to maximise the benefits of the railway through Midlothian, and the line passes through our or near to our priority areas, and the opportunities have arisen to improve the viability of Newton Grange and Gorebridge town centres. I think the programme of safe cycleways and pathways providing links to stations, communities, schools, colleges, etc. has begun, with routes identified and some installed already in anticipation of the new Battle Community High School. Progress has been made as regards, as Kenny said, on the hop-on, hop-off bus, which will take visitors and hopefully Midlothian residents around some of our tourist attractions. In Newton Grange, it will go from Newton Grange on a round trip. And there have also been discussions taking place on the possibilities of car and bike hire at some of our stations, and that will hopefully keep visitors in Midlothian. I can't miss out, obviously, the phenomenal success of to date of the railway, and I think that this augurs well for Midlothian. It means we have to continually work hard to maximise the success, and therefore I would recommend that we accept the recommendations as detailed out by Kenneth at part 6. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Rosie. Councillor Coventry.
Yeah, thanks, Provost. Yeah, I welcome the report. I just want to draw the Council's attention to a paragraph at the top of, I think it's page 124, my site's going here, about the new line providing ready access to educational training at Edinburgh College, Borders College and Queen Margaret University. The new line now makes it really easy for young people and adults to access opportunities now, not only in Edinburgh, but down in Galashiels, and also at Tweed Bank. For example, Borders College are relocating their campus from Newton St Boswell's next to the Tweed Bank station. That's due to open in August. So that means that whereas before an individual who wanted to go and study, say, gamekeeping or agricultural studies would have to go over to Oak Ridge College in West Lothian, it's now only maybe 20 minutes away down the Borders Railway. So that's just an example of the difference it's making to the population of Midlothian.
Councillor De Wink.
Yeah. The border railway is a very important economic vein through Midlothian. And we are saying here how well we have done. And I just feel that we could do an awful lot better. I feel we ought to take much more note of the potential that the railway brings to Midlothian. And I would encourage the Council to set up more meetings with parties that are interested in it, who have the benefit from the railway, who have potential benefit, and that we also communicate with our colleagues in the borders. I've suggested this on a number of occasions, but it's fallen on deaf ears. I would like to reiterate it. I went to the very interesting meeting last week in what used to be the Missoni Hotel, now has got another name, and where our chief executive spoke eloquently. Also Keith Brown was there. But the story that Andrew Mickle had to tell was really quite awesome. And I feel, this deals with mainly shore fare. However, there is just so much likely to come from it. We are referring to in excess of 1 million. Well, the original estimate was 600,000. I think we will be well over 1 million, especially once the new Tapestry for Scotland building is opened later on. But there is huge potential, and I feel we are just taking it too easy, and I would like to see much more activities where we support in a much more constructive way this potential economic vein.
I'm sure the officers will take that on board. Councillor De Wink, do we accept the Chief Executive?
Yeah, just briefly to comment on that. I mean, in terms of other parties who may be interested to meet with us so we can work with, very keen to do that. I think it's very important, as the Councillor says, that we do take every opportunity to promote this. I suppose the other thing I would say in terms of working with the borders, I mean, all the projects set out in this report, with the exception of those relating to the opening ceremony, are joint projects with Borders Council and others. So in terms of the inward investment projects, the tourism projects, we're running them all jointly with Borders.
Thank you. Happy to accept the recommendations in this report. Thank you. Item number 15, Midlothian Integration Joint Board Financial Assurance Update. Report by Mr Fairley, Head of Finance and Integrated Service Support.
Thanks, Provost. This report provides an update to Council on the financial assurance work that's being undertaken in lead up to delegation of resources by both the Council and NHS Lothian to the Integrated Board. Since the board's legal constitution in June, the board's taken steps to put in place what I would consider to be appropriate and proportionate financial governance arrangements, with a focus now on finalising the board's strategic plan for the period 2016 to 19. As we move towards the 1st of April, the critical issue for both the Council and NHS Lothian is to determine the resources that will be provided directly to the IJB to deliver against that strategic plan. In the report in section 3 we set out the position for council budgets, with the expectation is resources will be determined when council sets its budget on the 9th of February, and at that point determine the resources that will be allocated to the IJB for 16-17. Section 4 of the report provides an update regarding the position with NHS Lothian resources. And I think it's fair to say at this point we're not expecting that the budget will be determined by NHS Lothian until later in March 16, where resources delegated to the IJB be determined at or after that point. So that is very close towards the new financial year. Work will continue up to and I'm sure beyond 1st of April to ensure that the resources that are delegated from both partners to the IJB, and particularly resources from NHS Lothian, represent a fair share, and that there are appropriate risk sharing arrangements in place, and that these are acceptable. Members will appreciate that there are, within the size of NHS Lothian, there are a number of risk sharing arrangements, for example around things like GP prescriptions, and it's important that we make sure as we move into the new delegated arrangements with the IGB that there's no financial turbulence caused by the changes. So what we want to do in terms of the remaining financial assurance work is to ensure that the risks that are inherent in the integration scheme and the partnership are understood and are appropriately mitigated as we in the lead up to 1st of April and beyond. Provost, today Council is simply asked to consider the recommendations which are set out in section 8.
Thank you. Councillor Johnson.
Thank you very much. I do propose that we accept these recommendations to note the financial assurance and the delegated amount that the board will get, and to agree to have a further update in March. And it is important that we negotiate very carefully for making sure that we do have the appropriate amounts of money coming from each parent body to the board, and to make sure that that money is protected and we use it for the services that we should do, because we need to protect the healthcare outcomes for the folks in Midlothian. Thank you.
Questions or comments? Council happy to accept recommendations in the report. Thank you. Move to item 16, and I have to ask Council's permission to suspend standing orders to continue with this report. Do I have a 2/3 majority support? Those in favour, please show. Thank you. This is a Community Safety and Justice Partnership Governance report by Mrs McHugh, Director of Health and Social Care.
Thank you, Provost. This report sets out proposals for the remit and operation of the Safer Communities and Shadow Reducing Reoffending Partnership. It also sets out alternative scrutiny arrangement for the police and fire services. The Scottish Government's new model for community justice sets out requirements for the formation of a Reducing Reoffending Partnership. And at an earlier meeting this year in June, Council agreed that the Community Safety Partnership as was would take on the shadow role for this new requirement from November of this year. It's anticipated that the shadow role will cease in the 1st of April 2017. In terms of background, it was way back in March 2013 that the Community Safety the Council agreed to amalgamate the Shadow Police and Fire Board, as it was then, with the Community Safety Partnership, and to establish what we call the Safer Communities Board. and it was, because of its responsibilities in relation to scrutiny, it was also made a standing committee of the Council. The functions of that board are included in Section 3, and that includes both those functions that relate to the community safety remit, but also the functions that relate to the scrutiny role. The challenge going forward, and in some degrees the challenge up to now as well, has been to get the right balance between the scrutiny activity with the wider developmental role of the board. And that challenge becomes more acute as it develops a wider developmental role in relation to community justice. The requirements in relation to the police and fire scrutiny is set out in paragraph 4.1. And paragraph 4.2 set out the requirements of the new community justice model that is required to replace what was the CGAs. In particular, it highlights the focus on collective responsibility. No one agency is responsible for community justice. It's spread across a number of different agencies, all of whom make an important contribution, and the challenge is for those agencies to work together to understand the landscape, make good useful use of the information that's available, and in particular the key responsibility is to develop that strategic planning function for the delivery of the community justice functions locally. Paragraph 5.2, it's proposed, therefore, that the new body should be titled the Community Safety and Justice Partnership. Paragraph 5.2 sets out proposals for both, recognises that the scrutiny role doesn't sit easily with these new partnership arrangements, and in particular the focus on strategic planning, and it sets out proposals for a wider remit and revised membership of the Community Safety and Justice Partnership Board, and also it recognises that this new board will report to the Community Planning Partnership. Paragraph 6 sets out alternative arrangements for the scrutiny of police and fire, and in particular the establishment of the Police and Fire Board, and this board will remain a committee of the Council. In terms of resource, there's been additional resource allocated by Scottish Government, and that resource has been used currently to develop this new function around community justice. Members are asked to consider the proposals, the recommendations in paragraph 6.
Thank you. Councillor Parry.
Thank you, Provost, and thank you for this report. It's incredibly put together very well. The strategy to implement is the right one, and having sat on the board myself, I can see very clearly how splitting the two purposes in two will work better for our residents. And it's quite clear from the appendix and the way it's put together just exactly how encompassing the partnership part is, particularly when you look at the things that are so important to certainly my constituents: violence against women, housebreaking, antisocial behaviour, violent offending, re-offending. I know it's something that I'm asked a lot about, and I'm sure it's something that Labour members are asked about a lot. I don't know how they answer that when they don't take up their places. So really hopeful that the dummies will be put back in, and I wait with bated breath to see if the opposition are going to take up the place on this. But otherwise, I recommend that we move the recommendations. Thank you.
Questions or comments? Councillor Pottinger.
I think I'd like that dummies remark removed. There's various reasons why the former procedure wasn't worked with, and improvements into it have to be recognised as necessary improvements to the structures, the governance and the scrutiny and the activity in it. And yes, you're right, this system can work. It's a lot better than the previous system, and you're right in that response, but not in response to the personal kind of descriptions of that. I don't think that was correct. The Labour members will be involved in the Police and Fire Rescue Board, and they will be involved in the Community Safety and Justice Partnership as two separate identities, and that's a better way of working. And the Labour members I was going to propose for the Police and Fire Rescue Board would be Councillors Montgomery and Muirhead.
Councillor Russell.
Thank you, Provost. I'd like to second Councillor Montgomery and Muirhead for the Police, Fire and Rescue Board, given the experience that they've had in a previous existence of the Lothian Borders Police Board.
Councillor Johnson.
Thank you very much. We welcome the Labour's participation in these two boards enormously, and we're just going to have the same people as we had previously on these boards.
Did I hear correctly then? Did you say you were taking part in both, Councillor Pottinger, or just the one? Councillor Muirhead.
I'm about to move membership of the Community Safety and Justice Partnership as well. And I'd like to move Councillors Russell and Pottinger. Like Councillor Pottinger, I'm disappointed at the comments that were made there about spitting the dummy out. I contrast that with the comments that were made in a previous report where Councillor De Vink asked some legitimate questions and the administration were quite content to leave it to the Chief Executive to comment. We heard absolutely nothing from the administration. They're quite happy to make snide wee comments like were just made there, but they're not prepared to actually make comments when some legitimate questions are being asked. I find that quite disappointing.
Provost, just a second. Councillors Russell and Pottinger, and the reason that we're coming back on these two boards is that they actually need us.
Okay. We have to accept the nominations of the Labour group. Okay. Thank you. Standing orders are back in play. Item number 17, Road Services Collaboration Proposal, report by Mr Blair.
Thanks, Provost. This report seeks Council approval to establish an interim shadow joint committee to enable us to explore opportunities amongst the Edinburgh, Lothians, Borders and Fife roads authorities. The detailed background is set out fully in section 2, together with considerable commentary on the governance arrangements. In terms of the operational aspects, there are benefits in sharing, and these are outlined on page 157. Council should also note that close working is already in place amongst Roads colleagues, and today Council is asked to note and approve the recommendations detailed in the report, and my colleague Neil Dougal is here to assist if there's any matters of clarification which Council may have. Thanks, Provost.
Councillor Rosie.
Thank you. Right, thanks, Provost. Thanks, John, for the report. I think this is a positive report, and it shows the way forward in us getting a formal approach to collaboration. And this is going to be a benefit to Midlothian and the other 5 councils involved in it, where we're going to benefit from additional expertise and intelligence, things like the availability of specialist equipment, effective procurement with a better value for money. And I would recommend that the Council approves the development of a government first group with the creation of a shadow joint committee with a minimum of 4 participating councils, which will allow the new arrangements to proceed and provide delegated authority to the Director of Resources to make arrangements to the new governing body and to report back. Thank you.
Anyone else happy to accept the recommendations in this report? Thank you. Item number 18, Procurement Contract Delivery Plan 2016 to 2018. Report by Mr Fairley, Head of Finance and Integrated Service Support.
Provost, this report provides Council with details of the proposed contract delivery plan for the period 16 to 18. together with an update on the living wage accreditation that was recommended when we brought the procurement strategy forward to Council back in June. Section 2 of the report sets the contract, the procurement contract delivery plan in the context of the new legislation which will come into play in April 16, and it also recaps on the key aims of the procurement strategy that the Council approved back in June. Section 3 of the report sets out the aims of the contract delivery plan itself, while Section 4 highlights the challenge in securing further budget savings, particularly from the tendering phase of contracts, recognising that contracts have been tendered 2, sometimes 3 times already in terms of trying to secure financial savings. Section 6 of the report provides an update on the process of securing living wage accreditation. The procurement team met with representatives from the Living Wage Foundation late in November, and arising from that meeting, we've been advised that we should aim for accreditation by April 2016, and that's effectively the backstop date for that process. Again, Provost, Council is today asked to note the recommendations which are set out in Section 8 of the report. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr Fairley. Councillor Parry.
Thanks, Provost, and thanks, Gary. This is largely a really positive report. I think any penny that can be saved will be welcomed by the whole chamber, and I can't let the moment pass without congratulating movements on moving towards living wage accreditation. I think the industrial relations that we have in this council are fantastic, particularly when we look at other councils, for example North Lanarkshire, that's going through a process of redundancies and such like. So I'd like to note that we accept the recommendations of this report. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Montgomery.
It's just an observation, Provost. What I was wanting to ask, I mean, I know it can't just be guaranteed to be done, but is there any way that we can actually wait the contracts for local companies to actually have a better chance, if you want, on an equal, if everyone's on an equal footing? I mean, to me, that should be going to a Midlothian company if it's possible. I realise there'll be some things in this that they can't possibly do, given the scale of some of the contracts that are going out. But if there's any local companies that are actually in for tenders, I think they should look at giving some weighting towards them. I know it's not that easy, John. I mean, I know I've tried it before, but if anything can be done on an equal footing, I think we should be trying to do it.
Councillor Baxter.
Thank you, Provost. I'm just a wee bit concerned about the woolliness under Section 6 living wage. It says, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't know if these are steps which we have to take, but it says that the first step is to contact all existing contract providers and ask if they have plans in place. The next stage is to put a plan in place to seek payment of the living wage through future tenders. The next one, all future contracts will be encouraging providers who are successful. So none of those contractors or suppliers we have arrangements with need pay the living wage. We just need to say that we're asking them, would they be nice people and do it?
Can we have clarity on that?
Yeah, thanks, Provost. The process there, I suppose, reflects the challenge of having to procure within the very stringent, quite ranging procurement legislation it is, where you can't effectively tell the supplier, you will pay this to your employees. And recognising that suppliers have got a whole range of contracts, but there are mechanisms within the tendering and contract design process that we can use to really ensure that we can secure the living wage. We also need to step carefully through the process in terms of those contracts that are in place, some for quite lengthy periods of time, to make sure that we do due diligence in terms of securing that living wage accreditation. So we're being guided by the Living Wage Foundation and making sure that we take all the steps that they've advised, and in terms of their experience of working with other public sector organisations to secure accreditation.
Councillor Baxter.
Yeah, I'm not too worried about the accreditation for ourselves here. Obviously, that's very important that we do the right thing. But the more pressure we can apply towards our suppliers to make sure that, you know, if enough of their customers come to them and say, look, we're really keen that you start paying them the living wage, then it might have an effect. And if we can apply as much pressure as possible rather than you know, adhering to the process, if you like, that's what I would be looking for.
Yeah, the expectation is, working with the Support of Living Wage Foundation, that we would use every club in the bag, if you like, to secure accreditation for ourselves and payment of the living wage throughout Midlothian and throughout our supplier base.
Councillor Bennett.
Thanks, Provost. It's another question really for Gary. It's on the living wage, Gary, because I can't remember when it done it, but Osborne announced that the living wage was going up to £8 something from April next year. Is that right?
So the summer budget had an announcement that in April 16 there'd be what was called a national living wage, which would be, I think, if my memory serves me right, £8.20, with the expectation it would rise to £9 by 2020. The living wage the Living Wage Foundation's rate is above that, and the Scottish Local Government living wage agreed through the Scottish Joint Council in COSLA is above that rate already. So in terms of our own employees, we're the 2-year pay deal would see the minimum wage for local government employees be £8.33 on the 1st of April 16.
Just to follow up, Joe, if my memory is right, and I've not went into it in detail, but I'm sure there's a age limit of 25, that you've got to be 25 before you achieve the national living wage. Now, 25, I was married with a family. I think it's something the council is going to have to address. I'm not saying on day to day, but we'll need to address the position of the national living wage.
Yeah, you're right. The national living wage that was announced in the budget would apply from those 25 and over. The current minimum wage would apply to those that in work that are below that age.
Councillor Baxter.
So just to clarify then, that this council its policy is to follow the living wage as a minimum, not the national living wage.
Yeah, and that's what living wage through accreditation with the Living Wage Foundation would be.
My understanding is that Osborne's living wage is what was the minimum wage. We just changed the name of it to kid on he was paying the living wage. Anyway, Council happy to accept the recommendations in this report. Thank you.
Chair, just to clarify a remark, Mrs Russell declared an interest in item 19, and I gave advice back to Councillor Milligan afterwards, just to clarify for all members, including Councillor Mrs Russell, that for items 19 and 20, whilst they remain high level and are effectively strategic decision making by the Council, then in terms of the Code of Conduct there's no reason to leave. However, if the discussion drills down to individual grants, it then becomes operational, and if anyone has a declarable interest in any of the recipients, whether or not that recipient is being discussed, they should then declare an interest and leave at that point. But at the moment there's no need for any councillor to declare an interest.
Okay. Item 19, Midlothian Council Small Grants Allocation 2016-17, report by Mrs McHugh, Director Adult Health and Care.
Thank you, Provost. This report seeks approval for the awarding of the one-year council grants to communities. It's a small grants programme for the funding of third sector organisations for the coming financial year. Members will recall that in June 2014, Council approved a set of recommendations following an extensive review of how grants were dispersed across the whole of the Council. That review included efficiencies in terms of the funding. It also set out arrangements for both three-year grant funding arrangements and one-year funding arrangements. It set out 4 funding streams that were directly linked to both the Council's and the Community Planning Partnerships priorities. Most importantly, the review brought together all of that activity around the allocation of grants into one single process, and that activity had previously taken place across the whole of the Council. This report sets out proposals for the allocation of grants for the coming financial year. Last year, Council received a report that covered both the 3-year grants allocation as well as the 1 year, but this year the report is covering the 1-year grant allocation for the coming year. In terms of the process that was undertaken by the community teams, they worked very closely with MVA and the voluntary sector, providing information, but also providing clinics where folk could come along and receive assistance with developing their application. Detail is on the proposals, and the outcome of the assessment process is provided in the appendix. Council's asked to consider the recommendations in section 6. I would also add, however, that in relation to section 4, recommendation 4 rather, the intention going forward is that we would look to bring back a further report to Council early in the new year, and that report will look at how we can strengthen our approach to targeted areas, and in particular how we can link in with the discussion that happened within the Chamber on the seminar around participatory budget, and look at bringing back proposals in relation to that. I'll pause there.
Thank you. Councillor Constable.
Thank you, Provost. Before moving these recommendations, just a few comments I want to make. This is a subject which often generates more heat than light, and so I wish to express disappointment that the information that we were given in these papers was not as comprehensive as last year's. Now, I understand that the elected members now have all this information, but I would ask that we have more comprehensive information when these grants are awarded. Moving to the recommendations, moving recommendation 1 as that, and 2, which notes that for small below £3,000 grants, the next round of bids will be invited in, well, that would read 2016 for 2017/18. And I'd like to add that members are given a full briefing on these prior to the recommendations being put to Council and afterwards. Moving on to the next page of recommendations. Recommendation 3 is something that I'm sure all members in this chamber would agree to, that the third sector does make tremendous contributions to our communities and our county. And to welcome especially 4, where we have often said that we want to try and give more weighting to our priority communities, and I'd like to see that coming. I look forward to hearing about that next year. So, having said that, I wish to move the recommendations with the comments I've made.
Councillor Milligan.
Yeah, I'm kind of surprised to hear the Deputy Leader of the Council saying we now have all the information. I certainly didn't have it, and I didn't think any of the other members in the Labour group have the information you're talking about. Last year when we got this report, it told you what group had applied, what they had applied for, what they were going to spend with the money, what the outcome was going to be for that money, the weighting and the scoring that had been given to each application, and indeed it was explained to us that this would allow us to follow the public pound and to get better value for money, and that reports would come back as to how that money was spent. So firstly, we didn't have anything like the information, and I can only assume we didn't have it because if you remember right across parties here, we actually continued this at the last year to get further information, to get explanations as to how several groups that were doing the exact same thing had scored completely differently, and how the marking had been worked for us. So I certainly didn't have that information in front of me just now, and I would have hoped to have got it. So I just wonder, first and foremost, can you tell us if the administration have more information than us, because we certainly didn't have that just now.
Okay, I can answer that, Councillor. I think Stephen Birmingham perhaps sent you the information about what was allocated and what was awarded. I think that was sent to you earlier on this week. In terms of the process, last year we were in a transition. So it was about bringing at least 12 funding streams across the council into one clear funding stream where it was visible, where there was a clear criteria across the board about the funding. So we agreed, a lot of work went into creating four funding streams and the funding that would be allocated to that. And each funding stream had its allocation, had its criteria. Then from that last year, we allocated the funding. So that was for the big 3-year grants plus the 1-year grants last year. So this year, we slimmed it down because it was the 1-year grants. I apologise that you haven't got you didn't get the information immediately about who applied and who got it. But that's what we did this year. So this year's a much slimmer version because it's the 1-year grants.
Sorry, Provost, it doesn't answer the question. What we've got here is I've applied for a grant. We've got nothing as to what that grant's for. Nothing at all, and that was in last year's papers, unless I'm mistaken. That was the information we wanted. We also wanted the feedback on what we were promised last year was that you come back to us, well, here's who we're allocating the money to. It's very much clearer. Here's the rules, here's the criteria they can spend this money on. You know, what have the outcomes of that been? Has that been reported back? If so, where is it? Where are the elected members going to get to see this? Because the Deputy Leader of the Council just says that we have all the information we had last year, and quite clearly we don't.
Can I say that you won't have the information just now because these were the grants that were allocated from the 1st of April onwards. So the grants that people got last year were only allocated in the 1st of April. So for the large grants, we have a governance programme where we look at the large grants 6 monthly and the small grants that will be at the end of the year. So the end of the financial year is when we'll get the information in. People were asked to provide information when they applied for these grants, and by and large, everyone has applied. Well, I'll take that back. They have provided the information that was required in order to allow them to apply for these grants.
Councillor Milligan.
Yeah, it still doesn't ask why we've not got that information in front of us here. However, it looks like I'll get that another way. I'm quite surprised that we've changed where we were here. When I spoke to the administration this morning, I was looking for a continuation of this to sort of go through some of this information to get additional help and understanding of what we were doing here, because there did seem to be some discrepancies. All I have for Stephen Birmingham is who was granted money last year, and even that's completely inaccurate with the 1 or 2 checks that I've done. Secondly, was to look for a seminar so as members could get a full understanding of what was being applied for. When you then go into it, and I'll give you some examples. For example, I contacted Bonnerill Groves Boys Club yesterday to say to them, look, I notice you're not on this. Have you forgot to fill this in, or has it been missed? I got an email back this morning saying, hiya Derek, thanks. It took me 7 hours to fill it in last year after many phone calls and help to fill it in. I filled it in, I put it in, we were awarded £2,150 odd. Really grateful, and then we got a letter saying we needed additional information. We gave in the additional information and we got no money. So we didn't bother filling it in this year because we didn't get a grant. However, the paperwork I've got says that they got a grant last year. However, they haven't had a grant. When you actually go through this, and this is what amazes me about the way we're doing this. We talk about allocating this to where it's needed. And I'm going to give you an example, and I didn't really want to get down to 1 or 2 examples, but if you look through this paper here, Bonnerill Community Council, for example, is going to be awarded £1,800 odd. At its AGM, it couldn't get anybody to stand for the majority of its official positions. It couldn't get a treasurer, it couldn't get a secretary, it couldn't get a vice chairman. Everybody who's in there now has had to be sort of near edged in to say it, or certain people who've been doing the minutes and stuff like that have been sort of asked to have to take this on. and yet the boys' club that has 1,000 youngsters and between boys and girls hasn't got anything out of this application. Now, that you can look at this right across the board here, that there are tons of groups missing here that I would expect to be in this funding application. Now, what we're asking for here is a continuation for one cycle to February, plenty of time to sort out grants and to issue grants. As the directors just told you, they're not issued until April. So there isn't a hurry to do this. This is a request to get further information, more understanding of the thinking of how we're dealing with this here. It's no political at all. There's no reporters sitting here. But all we're asking here is that we continue this, take a seminar, allow us to get a full breakdown of what folk are applying for, find out why groups that applied for stuff last year didn't seem to have been paid, what happened, what the breakdown was, and then to find out how we get groups who actually need help to benefit for this, because it quite clearly seems to be those that can fill in the forums and put the correct buzzwords in are getting funding here, and groups that actually we should be helping aren't they?
Councillor Constable.
Thanks, Robert. I just want to assure Councillor Milligan that we don't have any more information than he does on this. It is, as he's referred to there, there's so many examples. It's a very, very complicated process. What we've done in this position is to get it through, but with the comments that we will need more information in future years on the process of it. But it is important to have it non-political, I agree, and decide, and these very complex positions decided by the process we set up. It is the lack of communication about how it's been done this time that is causing the trouble. And of course, I'm sure anyone with the comments that we've made just now will be taken on board for the following years.
Councillor Muirhead.
Thanks, Provost. When we discussed this previously, I mean, I expressed my concerns about this whole process because I didn't think it was getting the money to the right places that we should be. We've had a requirement in this council to bend the spend towards the areas of multiple deprivation for a number of years. And I can see a lot of evidence within this that has been done. I take it on board what was said and what is noted in the recommendation that was welcomed by Councillor Constable, that we're going to look at that from 17-18. But that, you know, that's too late. If you look at this, I've taken a wee bit of time to go through the allocations here. You know, and we're failing singularly to get this to get any impact on the areas of multiple deprivation, despite the fact that it does say in the report that there had been an attempt to do some area targeting. You know, 60% of the allocation, 15% of the allocation is I couldn't allocate to specific areas. It's Midlothian wide, but of the remainder, 60% is allocated to Bonnyrigg, Dalkeith, Pennycook, and Dander Hall. 9.3% allocated to Gorebridge, 3.8% to Woodburn, yet Cousland gets 2.8%. Woodburn is the place in our county that needs the most help, I think, in terms of the areas of multiple deprivation statistics, yet they're getting 1% more than an area like Cousland. I'm not believe me, I'm not trying to pick on any area, and I'm not being parochial. And I'll explain I'm not being parochial when I say that Gorebridge gets 9.3%, and another area within my own constituency, Newton Grange, gets 12.4%. There is something fundamentally wrong with the way we are allocating these resources. Now, you could turn around and say that the areas aren't applying. That in itself is a problem that we're not addressing. I know we've made attempts to do it by involving MVA and the likes to give advice on this, but it isn't working. And we really need to do something about that because it's quite clearly the case that we're not managing to target these resources into the areas that we should be targeting them to.
Councillor Pottinger.
Yeah, obviously, I think it should be referred. There's just too many questions in here, that are getting asked, and it can't be railroaded through. These questions have to be answered, and the lack of consultation in this process the lack of scrutiny into it, and in many instances the lack of clarity that's in this paper that is given so many questions to be asked. Geographical spread, fairness, bend to spend for the particular areas. All these kind of criteria, should be re-examined, and that's only then we can be confident that we went forward properly and fairly in the awarding of these grants. We've got to make sure that these organisations are bona fide. We've given lots more information in the past. What they got in the past funding, the desktop exercise is not the be-all and end-all of it. The seminar that the MVA had on grant funding is not the be and end-all of consultation. That seminar could be deemed as a big sort of picture on general funding rather than, although it was headed for small grants, but many organisations, when you've seen that as part of the process of applying for this as a rather than an educational kind of event on sort of generally applying. And Councillor Johnson could probably confirm to me, that she's been at, or there's been an AGM, an organisation that's on this list that's in breach of its constitution. It's in breach of its standing orders, and it's in breach of OSCAR by not being able to submit its audited accounts. When they had their AGM 6 months after the deadline for submitting the audited accounts, they still appear on this list as an organisation that's looking for funding. I'm not going to name that organisation, but I'm going to say there's organisations on this list that maybe shouldn't be on this list, and the local members' information to this is paramount, and actually the process. And we've got to give time for this information to come through and to verify many of these applications rather than just railroading it through just now. We really have to, for the sake of proper scrutiny and to be legal on our following of this public pound into many of these grant organisations, and for fairness, we have to refer this to a future meeting. Thank you.
Dr. Smith.
Thank you. What the politicians decide is up to them. I mean, it's up to you as politicians. However, in terms of a number of things that you've discussed there, scrutiny, we do scrutinise this. There was a report to audit, or we had an internal audit report about how we allocated funding, and that was reported on in June 2014, not to the audit committee, it was an internal report. And what it talked about was the lack of visibility to all of the funds that we sent out at that point. So I could be allocating funds to one organisation, same as Evelyn could have been, allocating funds, and John's teams. So there was no visibility in terms of these funds. So hence we have one grants funding stream that comes in, and it's got 4 different parts to it. So there is scrutiny and there is accountability to that. Now, I take on board you'll have local knowledge of groups. In terms of the allocation, this council approved an allocation in 2014. It approved the way that we allocate grants, and it followed that through in December in terms of the allocation of the grants to the big grant funds and the small grant funds. In terms of communication with organisations, we have done, I think, it's not been a desktop exercise, it's been a physical exercise of people going out and speaking to groups, speaking to organisations, speaking with our links, speaking with our partners, offering to help people fill in the forms. So we've done that. And offered to support people. You're right, if you're good at filling in forms, sometimes you get the funding. But that's the point of having these independent sort of groupings of staff and people that actually review. So it keeps a bit of distance between us as directors, you as elected members, and staff on the ground. So hopefully I've answered some of your questions there in terms of governance, in terms of scrutiny, in terms of allocation. And anything else, you can let me know. Derek says somebody said they got an award last year, or it was down that they got an award, and you're saying that they didn't get that. I would need to know about that so that we can follow it up. Thank you.
Councillor Milligan.
Yeah, Provost, I think with the Director admitting there openly that it's now a fact that if you can fill a form and you've got a better chance of granting than what you have if you haven't actually answers the questions. Could I move that we continue this paper and ask for a seminar in full council to allow members to fully scrutinise this for the elected members who are elected by the public out there, who are the people who are asked the questions out there that have to answer them, to be able to understand and to be able to explain them. We're not asking for anything political here, we're just asking to be able to understand fully and to challenge and to make sure that the funds are being allocated to the right places. Jim makes the point very greatly there that, like the area of greatest deprivation is probably the least serviced with this. You can see in here where there are groups who really struggle to have anybody even attending them, getting reasonably big grants in the size of grants in here, and other ones with hundreds, if not 1,000 youngsters in the community not even applying because they've not been given any grants before. So can I formally move that we continue this to a seminar of the Council and take this decision at the February Council?
Okay, thank you. Councillor Muirhead. Councillor Constable.
Thank you, Provost. We've had some very good points made from Councillor Muirhead and Councillor Pottinger. This is the bias towards the leafy suburbs is very, very strong. You just look at lottery funding. We don't do as well in Midlothian as we do. I'm sure we buy a lot more tickets than we get the money's worth out of. It's the leafy suburbs where they don't buy the tickets. The posh tennis clubs get the funding, and this is a fact of life. I'm pleased to hear how Mary is saying how we shall be endeavouring to overcome these difficulties, and it is an ongoing process. However, we did set up a process. We have it here. The communication of it wasn't that great. Therefore, I'm moving that we accept the recommendations with the bits that I've added, asking for a full briefing on future occasions, and that therefore I wish to move the recommendations.
Okay, we have. Can we have a seconder first of all for Councillor Johnson? Thank you. We have before us a proposal that we put this back to a seminar. The Council. All those in favour, please show.
Eight.
All those against, please show.
Eight.
I cast my vote against the seminar. All those in favour of the recommendations as amended by Councillor Constable, please show.
Could I ask, is Councillor DeVink raising his hand or not?
Councillor Link, are you voting on this? No, okay.
8.
All those against the recommendations as amended?
Eight.
Can I cast my vote in favour of the recommendations as amended? We move to item number 20, Gala Days Funding 2016-17 and beyond. A report by Mr Blair.
Thanks, Provost. The purpose of this report is to regularise the ongoing level of funding for Gala Days at 2/3 of the 2014-15 levels for financial year 2016-17. Council will be fully aware of the background which is set out in section 2 of the report, and today Council is invited to consider the recommendations which I have detailed on page 190 of today's papers. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr Blair. Councillor Rosie.
Thanks, Provost. Thanks, John. I think we all recognise the important part that galas and events play in our communities, and I think it was recognised that there were concerns of what was being perceived as a burdensome and bureaucratic grant application and monitoring arrangement appropriate to year-round grant-aided groups and organisations. That's why it was felt that really they shouldn't be part of the grant process. So in that, you can see that on page 189, the vast majority of payments received are actually in-kind support that's given by the Council. And although it would appear there has been drops, a drop in the amount of the in-kind support. I think a lot of that's due to the way that we now work with the communities and the organisations and putting these events on. Also things like, you know, different new investment in marquees and things like that. They're easier to put up and dismantle, so less man hours are used, and different things like that. So from that, as I say, we did recognise the fact and the importance, and therefore it was felt they should be taken out of the grant processes. And that's why the recommendations I would propose at 8 are that the Gallaudet funding is identified as a separate funding stream from the small grants programme for 2016-17. Separate small grants Gallaudet applications and monitoring forms be prepared, which are more appropriate to them for Gala funding bids, and that the responsibility for the management of the Gallaudet funding rests with the head of commercial operations. Thank you.
Questions or comments? Okay, happy to accept the recommendations in this report. Thank you. Item number 21, revised guidance on the Councillor's Code of Conduct, report by Gareth Lawley, Chief Executive.
Thank you, Provost. The revised Councillor's Code of Conduct came into effect in December 2010, and at the current time the Standards Commission is reviewing and revising the guidance that accompanies the code. The draft of the revised guidance was circulated to elected members on the 23rd of November, and the Council set up a meeting of the Standards Committee to discuss this on the 3rd of December. As a result of this meeting, a submission has been prepared to reflect the views of the elected members on the Standards Committee. And due to the fact that feedback had to be submitted to the Standards Commission by 11th of December, the Midlothian feedback has been submitted pending full approval at today's meeting, and a copy of the submission is attached to Appendix 1. Before moving to recommendations, whilst the Standards Committee only commented on issues relating to social media and declarations of interest, it's worth noting the guidance also covers issues around about gifts and hospitality, confidentiality requirements, the use of council facilities, and also conduct at meetings. And these are all important matters which I would remind members of, and I think the guidance remains recommended reading, even though it's fairly dry in places. Moving to recommendations, the Council is recommended to note the work of the Standards Commission in reviewing the guidance, and to note and endorse the submission drafted by the Midlothian Council Standards Committee in respect of that. Thank you, Provost.
Thanks, Chief Executive. Councillor Johnson.
Thank you very much. I agree that we should accept the recommendations, although everybody at the meeting we had did note that they were very restrictive in their explanations for some of the rules.
We have to accept the recommendations in this report, Council. Thank you. Item number 22, Webcasting Council, Cabinet and Committee Meetings, report by Mr Blair, Director of Resources.
Thanks again, Provost. This report follows the briefing on webcasting which was held in this chamber for elected members on the 1st of December. As set out in section 2 of the report, a number of Scottish councils currently have invested in webcasting council meetings. Commentary is also provided within the report on the benefits of webcasting as detailed in page 202. The resource implications, which include the necessity to replace the existing microphone system, are set out in section 3.1, and today Council is asked to consider the recommendations as set out in section 4 of today's papers. Thanks, Provost.
Thank you, Mr Blair. Councillor Rosie.
Thanks, Provost. Thanks again, John. I think that by accepting this report will improve the democratic process within Midlothian, and it's noted that 120 councils within the UK have invested in webcasting, and that includes many Scottish councils. And this will allow Midlothian residents who are unable to attend council meetings for various reasons, such as work, etc., to see what is happening and how decisions are arrived at. At 3.7, it says that research into webcasting shows that communities are better connected into the decision-making process, and it's a useful tool in strengthening planning partnerships and other community groups. And I would recommend that Council approves the introduction of webcasting in the Council chamber, agrees that initially we use webcasting at Council and Cabinet meetings only, and we consider its use in other committees later. And I accept that this, because I accept that they could be a sensitive matter with some committees and has to be given some thought. And as I say, we approve the addition of £19,000 into the Capital Fund for 2015-16 and a supplementary estimate of £14,154 15-16 in the revenue budget. Sorry, that's the wrong one. A supplementary estimate of that £14,154 in the Capital Fund and in the revenue budget for 2016. Thank you.
Councillor Milligan.
Yeah, Provost. If I thought this really would enhance the democratic process in Midlothian Council, I would vote for it. I can't see any real benefit at all. I think initially you'll have a few folk will look at this. At the moment this is recorded. Anybody who wants to listen to how the democratic decisions are made can sit and listen to it. Being able to see us isn't going to make a huge, great big difference. Just after we've actually decided that we can't really afford to help all the community groups in areas where we're cutting back and helping community groups, we're then talking about investing over 5 years £92,000 so that people can watch us on the TV. Do people really think that that's good value for money, or do you generally think if there was 100 local residents sitting in here now and you say to them, should you give this to a football team, the Brownies, the Scouts, or should you spend it on putting cameras up here to watch councillors debating and arguing, I think we would have a 100 to nothing vote to use this for community groups. We would move that there's no action that we invest in the new microphones that we need, as married in the paper, would be a one-off costing of £19,000, and that would be hat. And any additional money that would be left for this report could be fired into the pot for local groups, could be used to skew towards areas of deprivation, or used for gala days, or used for any other community groups. But certainly to spend that kind of money on bringing in TVs here that nobody's really going to watch, apart from when it suits big developers or licensing lawyers or whatever, I don't think it will be helpful to us. People can already listen to the recordings whenever they want, see the minutes. This is a public forum and you can never see a massive queue of people in here unless there's an area of controversy.
Councillor Muirhead.
Aye, I'd like to second Councillor Milligan on that. You know, you asked us not to repeat yourself, Provost, at the beginning of the council meeting. I'm going to repeat an issue at any opportunity I can, and that's about the areas of multiple deprivation. It's about bending the spend, and I would much rather see that £92,000 less than 19 for the improvement to the sound system, which I actually think we definitely need, given the problems we've had in the past wee while. I would rather see that going into the areas that need it, and no to televise this chamber.
Councillor Baxter.
Thank you, Provost. I've got a better way of saving £100,000. Let's abolish local elections. Let's abolish all elections. You can save an awful lot of money. What we're talking about here is improving democracy. And this is a tiny amount. We've got a budget of £200 million a year. You know, we were talking about overspends of £1.5 million on demand-led services. This is a tiny, tiny drop in the ocean. It's going to happen. You know, a quarter of councils are already doing this. Are we going to be the last? Are we going to be a laughing stock in Scotland because we're the only ones who don't allow the public to see what their councillors are up to? Really? We've already talked in the past about the problems with these microphone systems, with feedback, with them going off, all sorts of problems. As part of this capital outlay, we will be replacing these and improving the situation we already have. There are cost savings involved. Council officials who have been sitting here for about 3 hours today and probably another couple of hours, they can go away to the desk, have it on screen and see when the item before the one that they're going to be called to comes up and can come up here. That's just one example of the kind of savings. If you think differently, if you work differently. As to who's going to watch them, the figures speak to themselves. They were tiny when Edinburgh Council introduced them, but now we've got figures of 100,000 times. Since the independence referendum, ordinary people now have a yearning for getting involved in politics. If we tell them, no, you're not allowed to see what our councillors say because you're not going to be interested in it, what sort of message does that send to people? I'm sorry, we have to move into the current century. We cannot say that we don't want people have to listen to our podcast, or they'll have to ask for a written transcription before they find out what councillors say or do. I think that if we leave this too long, we're going to be seen to be dragging our heels, and I don't really want us to be in that position.
Councillor DeVink. Well, that was very eloquent, and I couldn't really agree more with Councillor Baxter. I find it rather rich when the leader of the Labour Party tells us that we should listen to what is being said, because he was opposed to that when Councillor Baxter introduced it. We need to stop being dinosaurs. We need to accept this.
Councillor Parry, did you? Councillor Milligan has proposed that we reject the recommendations but pay for an update on the microphone system. Is that correct? And Councillor Rosie proposed that we accept the recommendations. Those in favour? Can we have a seconder, first of all, for Councillor Rosie's motion? Rosary? Say a prayer for this one. Okay, Councillor Baxter, thank you. Now move to accept the recommendations as proposed by Councillor Rosie and excluding the ordinary committee meetings. Is that correct?
It's just that we consider them. Probably could be a seminar on that one or whatever, so that all.
But in the meantime, we only want them for council meetings and cabinet meetings.
Yeah.
Okay, those in favour of the recommendations by Councillor Rosie, please show. Those against, please show.
6.
In which case the recommendations are accepted. Thank you. Councillors, please. We move to item number 23. Proposed abandonment of protected A701 rural realignment and adopted Midlothian local plan. Report by Ian Johnson. Thank you.
Thanks, Provost. From the 1990s onwards, it's been recognised that the A701, particularly its northern end of Streighton and Bilston, has needed to have some attention to relieve congestion, particularly at peak times. Planning permission was granted in 2000 for a route that is now shown, that's a revised relief route that's now shown as the protected alignment in the current 2008 local plan, not to be confused with the current proposals for a route well to the west of the current A701, which is a proposal in the local development plan, which no doubt will be the subject of examination in the middle of next year. What we're talking about is the original alignment dating back from the planning consent of 2000 and as shown on the existing adopted 2008 local plan. Only part of that was implemented, that being the Gauntlemoss roundabout and the spur running down to the A7026 Auchendinny Road. there is no realistic prospect of that road alignment ever being built. And this actually is recognised in the existing, in the emerging local plan, where the issues relating to cost benefit in terms of ground conditions, etc., are explained briefly. Now, in normal course, that proposal dating from the 2008 local plan would simply elapse because it's not reshown in the new LDP, and as the new local development plan becomes adopted, then it would supersede the 2008 plan, and any provisions of that 2008 plan would simply fall. However, this report is brought to Council because there is an opportunity for the Council to assist a long-established local business to expand onto adjacent ground and provide additional jobs and to secure its longer-term future here in Midlothian. And the land concerned is currently sterilised by that route, that protected route. And therefore, rather than simply allowing time to pass and for the route proposal to drop away, which will take probably at least another year, then in relation to the opportunity to assist this local business, then the recommendation is for the formal abandonment of the route. And as it is a change to the adopted local plan for Midlothian, then it's brought before Council for consideration and hopefully, in accordance with the recommendation, your approval.
Thank you, Mr Johnson. Councillor Rosier.
Thanks, Provost. Thanks, Ian. I would just another move that we accept the recommendations at 6.
Councillor Brent.
Yeah, you heard the officer who explained what we're trying to do here, and it's just a tidy up exercise, so yes, I accept the recommendations.
Councillor Baxter.
Thank you, Provost. It's more a question. Now, in my capacity as the Council's representative on the Midlothian Access Forum, myself and the then Chair, John Pope, we did a recce of that area because John was particularly interested in the possibility of an off-road cycle route, which I think, from memory, follows more or less that line. It goes from the back of Asda, follows I think there's an old water pipe underneath. I don't think it's an old railway or anything like that. I think it's an old water pipe route. And it runs from there right up to Gowckley Moss, and we're quite keen that that is protected for a possible off-road cycle route or walkway or whatever. Now, so my question really is, does any of the land which this developer, this local business, is interested in developing on, does it impact on that? Because I know that the route in question is slightly away from any land adjoining buildings, etc. So I just really want to put my mind at rest that we're not going to end up having developments on land which could be very valuable in our transport strategy for the future.
Yeah, Provost. The land concerned is in the control of the Council, so that is an advantage straight away. I think the best thing is for that particular point, there's been no formal arrangements entered into with prospective purchasers of the land. So what I would suggest, Provost, is that that point is taken into consideration by our estates team in the negotiations on the disposal of the site.
Okay. Happy to accept the recommendations in this report. Thank you very much. Item number 24, European Commission report by Dr. Smith.
Thank you, Provost. My apologies for the lateness of this report, but we're kind of chasing money. We have an opportunity here to work with the Improvement Service and Edinburgh University to apply for funding for our targeted areas. We had submitted a bid last year in August 2014, and we only found out we were unsuccessful in October 2015. However, despite being unsuccessful in the original bid, the feedback was that we should resubmit another bid. which we have done, and that, or which we're in the process of doing at the moment, rather than we have done. So really, what we're asking is the Council is to endorse submission by the Council and its partners of a bid in response to the European Commission call for proposals for social policy innovation supporting reforms in social services as set out in this report. It trips off the tongue.
Thank you, Dr. Smith. Councillor Constable.
Thank you, Provost. Yes, happy to endorse this resubmission. The aims are excellent of it. Very often in these, it can be a bit like your driving test. A lot of people don't pass first time, I understand, and they pass the second time, but let's hope we succeed the second time.
Councillor Muirhead.
Can I just ask, it doesn't, I don't think, indicate in the report why the first bid wasn't approved? Was it simply, you know, run out of resources? Was it oversubscribed or what?
It was oversubscribed. They would only be looking at one for Scotland, but also it was the time frame by which we were going to implement the work. So the original submission, the finishing date was 2016, the end of 2016, and they were saying we wouldn't have been able to have completed that work by that time, and that's why they were quite positive about our bid, saying actually it was a good one, you should really resubmit within the new time scale.
Happy to accept this report. Thank you. We now move into private session.